Welcome to True You Ministries, the Christ-centered podcast for Christian women ready to stop struggling beneath the surface and experience deep, lasting healing. If you love God, but still wrestle with anxiety, rejection, people-pleasing, or emotional wounds, you're not alone. And you're not broken. Each episode helps you break false beliefs, heal at the root, renew your mind with biblical truth, and walk confidently in your identity in Christ. If you're ready to break lies, heal deep, and walk free, you're in the right place. You look at your to-do list and feel exhausted before you've even started. Things you normally handle feel harder. Your patience is shorter. Your motivation isn't what it used to be. And maybe you've quietly wondered, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get it together? If you're a Christian woman carrying family, relationships, work, responsibilities, expectations, and everyone else's needs, I want you to consider something. What if you're not lazy? What if you're emotionally exhausted? So let me ask you something. When was the last time you felt emotionally rested? Not physically rested, emotionally rested. When was the last time you weren't thinking about what someone else needed, worrying about what might happen next, or mentally working through another problem? Here's something I want you to try right now. Take a moment and do an emotional load check. Ask yourself, what am I carrying today? Don't think about your to-do list. Think about what's taking up emotional space. Maybe you're worried about one of your children. Maybe there's tension in your marriage or another relationship. Maybe you're concerned about finances or something happening at work. Or maybe you're carrying someone else's problem because you feel responsible for helping them fix it. Now, choose one thing that feels heaviest. That's where I want you to start. Because sometimes emotional exhaustion isn't about everything you're doing. It's about what you're carrying while you're doing it. One of the most common things I hear from women is, I don't understand why I'm so tired. And they're not talking about sleep. They're describing the exhaustion that comes from carrying stress, anxiety, responsibility, disappointment, and emotional pain for a long time. Recently, I spoke with a woman who told me, nothing is wrong, but I feel exhausted all the time. But as we talked, there was actually a lot happening beneath the surface. She was concerned about her aging parents. She was worried about one of her children. She was navigating tension in a relationship, managing responsibilities at work, serving at church, and trying to keep everyday life moving. There wasn't one enormous crisis. There were simply 1,000 small weights that never seemed to leave her shoulders. And that's what emotional exhaustion can look like. You're still functioning, you're still showing up, you're still getting things done. So everyone, including you, assumes you're okay. But internally, you're depleted. Eventually, your mind, body, and emotions start sending signals. Things that normally wouldn't overwhelm you suddenly do. You become more reactive. You have difficulty focusing. You don't have enough energy for things you normally enjoy. And sometimes you start criticizing yourself. Why can't I handle this? Why am I so unmotivated? I just need to try harder. But what if that's the wrong conclusion? Your exhaustion may not be evidence that you're failing. It may be evidence that you've been carrying too much for too long. Think again about that burden you identified earlier, the one that feels the heaviest. Now ask yourself, is this actually mine to carry? Because sometimes we're not only carrying our responsibilities, we're carrying other people's emotions, their expectations, their choices, their problems. And sometimes we're even carrying responsibility for outcomes we can't control. You can care deeply about someone without being responsible for fixing everything they're going through. There's something important we see in the life of Jesus. Jesus didn't live constantly rushing from one need to another. Luke 5:16 tells us that Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Think about that. There were still people who needed him. There was still ministry to do. There were still demands. But Jesus withdrew. Rest wasn't evidence of weakness, and exhaustion isn't a spiritual badge of honor. Some Christian women begin believing that being faithful means always being available, always helping, always saying yes, always carrying the burden. But God never asked you to be everything for everyone. There are burdens you're responsible for, and there are burdens you were meant to place back into God's hands. Part of emotional and spiritual maturity is learning the difference. So, let's get back to that one burden you identified. Ask yourself again, is this mine to carry? If this is your responsibility, don't immediately assume you have to carry it alone. Ask, what support do I need? Maybe you need to ask for help. Maybe you need a conversation. Maybe you need some intentional rest. But if the burden isn't actually yours, ask, what would releasing this look like? Maybe that means setting a boundary. Maybe it means allowing someone to experience the consequences of their own choices. Maybe it means accepting that you cannot control another person's response. Or maybe it means praying. God, I care deeply about this, but I cannot control how it turns out. I'm placing it back into your hands. You don't have to unload everything today. Start with one burden. Here's the question I want you to carry with you this week. The next time you hear yourself thinking, I just need to try harder, stop and ask, do I need to try harder, or do I need support, healing, or rest? That's a very different question, because your exhaustion isn't necessarily a character flaw. It may be information that needs attention, information that a burden has become too heavy, information that your heart needs to care instead of criticism. So instead of asking, what's wrong with me? Try asking, what is my exhaustion trying to tell me? Sometimes the first step toward healing isn't doing more. It's finally listening to what your heart has been trying to say. I'd love to hear from you. What's one thing that's been emotionally exhausting for you lately? Let me know in the comments. And if you're a Christian woman struggling with anxiety, fear, overwhelm, emotional exhaustion, or feeling stuck, subscribe to True You Ministries. Here, we're learning how to understand what's happening beneath the surface so we can move beyond simply managing symptoms and begin experience healing at the root. And if you know another woman who's been carrying too much for too long, share this video with her. Thank you for joining me on True You Ministries. If today's episode encouraged you, be sure to subscribe and share it with a friend who needs hope and healing. Remember, freedom is possible, healing is real, and your identity in Christ is worth walking in. Until next time, keep breaking lies, healing deep, and walking free.